Good afternoon to you fellas in what I understand is a hot and humid Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex.
Absolutely.
That's all it takes.
The heat index is like, it's like 105 today, heat index.
Yeah. We have baseball practice at 5:30, so not really looking too forward to that, but you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess.
That's true.
Yeah, I tell you, I had to decide this morning whether or not I wanted to put on a base layer, under my clothes before I went for my morning hike here in kind of the Almont Crested Butte area, or if I was just going to chance it and maybe be a little bit cool. So tough times here, fellas.
Yeah,
that's real rough, buddy.
Man, I tell you, so we were in Taos for a day about a week ago, and then we spent about a week in Pagosa Springs, and then we'll do about a week and a half up here near Crested Butte. And I don't think I'm going to want to go back. I never want to go back when we come up here, but something about this time, maybe it's just being gone for so long. I think I'll just stay.
Yeah, I'm up that way next week, so I can't wait.
Are you going up around Crested Butte?
I'm going to be up at Evergreen, Colorado. My dad's got a place up there, so we're going to head up there for about a week.
Sweet. Nice. Mike, do you guys ever get up this way?
No. The last time I was out there, it was for my buddy's 40th birthday. We went and played some golf out there, just a little bit south of Denver. But as a family, no, we haven't gone. We haven't been out there since I played out there.
If I didn't know any better, I thought maybe Mike was rubbing it in. I was telling him last week when we were in Pagosa, we rented a little condo, and I was just so busy trying to get everything ready, I didn't really pay attention. And we get there and walk out the back door on the patio, and I don't know, maybe 25, 30 yards away is the golf course. And like literally you could just walk out on the green or the tee box, and I didn't bring my clubs with me, which was painful. And I never got out there and played.
Shame on you, man. Shame on you.
That's all right. If that's the worst thing that happens on this trip, we're going to be doing all right.
I think you'll be okay.
Yeah.
So, well, Jason, man, appreciate you joining Mike and I here on the Off the Plate podcast. Thought it'd be cool to bring you in and visit with you a bit and talk about what it is that you do as a personal trainer, and not just for average Joes like myself. But for some serious athletes and some retired pros. And then, man, would also love to hear about kind of how you've been handling the whole COVID thing and how you've been working through all that. So
sure.
Just for folks that aren't familiar with Jason, you've been at the game for a while, right? You've been training since, I guess, was it 98? Is that right?
About 25 years.
Wow. Is that hard to believe?
Yeah, I was talking about just probably about a couple of weeks ago. Somebody had asked me how long I'd been doing it, and they saw an old picture of me when I had more hair on my head than I had on my face, and I was like, about 25 years. They're like, wow, man, because everybody is known, a personal trainer. Like, oh yeah, my plumber's personal trainer too. So it's to have career personal trainers. It's there are actually a few of us out there, that have been around for a while, but it's just. People come and go, and especially during circumstances like this is one of those, I use the term, pull the boat out of the water and scrape off the barnacles kind of a time, So if you don't have a dug in business model and clientele, you're having a rough time.
Man, I would imagine. So I try to stay physically fit. Try is the key word. But, just kind of watching what other folks are doing, and occasionally you'll come across other personal trainers that are talking about kind of the impact that it's had on their businesses. And man, I believe it. Like if you don't have those clients, those relationships established, and if your business isn't fairly diverse, because I understand you do some other things fitness related, then yeah, it's probably tough. You're probably updating the resume and looking to get out and do something else.
Absolutely. I've talked to a few people that have been in the business for 10 plus years, and they're doing something completely different now. I mean, they had to scramble, when all this stuff first started up, and, and with only the one revenue stream and working out of a facility that you don't own, then you're you were really struggling those last couple months.
So for you, you don't have an actual gym that you own, right? You go where your clients are and train in, I guess, whatever facilities they use. Is that right?
Absolutely. I have a facility here in Dallas that I just rent space from one of my friends that owns the company. And obviously that was impacted by this whole situation. And when that started to go down, I really just started to put a lot of stuff in my home for myself to work out. So I didn't have to worry about not being able to work out, because that's kind of part of the billboard, if you will. You kind of got to look the part and stay with it as well. And but then as I started talking to my clients, I just really started getting a lot of feedback that even when and if this stuff started to lift or lighten up a little bit, I don't think many of them were still comfortable going back to a facility that there was going to be a multitude of people in. So my gears just started turning, and I really jumped into gear fast and basically just, turned my 2.5 car garage into my own personal training studio. And then luckily enough, I've developed relationships with a number of my clients, and one of my other subsidiary businesses is developing fitness centers for residential and commercial use. And so I was lucky enough to, I'd say probably 60 to 70% of my clients have facilities in their home that I've built for them. And so it was either a situation where I'm going to their home or they're coming to mine, but none of them had really felt comfortable yet going back into a facility that's shared use.
So with
Mike,
I'm sorry. So with your clients every client has different goals, different stuff they want to do, have you had to, I guess, with sometimes with some of the guys' lack of facilities now, change up the style of workouts and stuff like that? Maybe it was a lot of stuff was I don't know, weight related to now maybe going more functional, more body weight type stuff. I'm sure that's been a big change in a lot of your clients.
It was a lot. I think a lot easier transition for myself. Was one of the things that I try to really focus on is making people understand the utilization and full utilization of various modalities in a fitness facility, whatever fitness facility they may be in, be it their own, if they've already developed this facility prior to meeting me, or a facility that they come to. You see so many people really, there's been this strange push into specialization. It's like, oh, I don't do any weights, I just do bands, I just do free weights, or all I do is CrossFit Olympic style lifting. Well, I try to implement a broad, basically just try to diversify it as much as possible, because I always tell people, I'm like, listen, you're paying a monthly fee to use whatever facility that you choose. I want you to be able to utilize and feel comfortable using as many of those different modalities that facility offers. So we're going to use a little bit of everything. I'm going to teach you the benefit, the pros and cons to every single thing that we have in here. What things you may reap a little bit more benefit from. And with these machines, you see so many people kind of gravitate toward the machines. I teach them the pros and cons of the machine, help them analyze the resistance of the machine, and kind of make the machine suit their bodies. So it makes that transition for me made it a lot easier for me, because they've gotten so used to me just kind of creating things out of nothing. And luckily for me, I have access to a lot with my relationship with free motion and whatnot. So I was able to, snag one of their dual cable crosses really quick and get it into my place, which that combined with some dumbbells, you give me one of those, some dumbbells and an adjustable bench, and I can pretty much do everything I need to do with anyone.
So Mike, when you guys built your new house there, did you put in a space for a fitness facility or
yes, we basically, one of the bedrooms, we turned it into a small little gym. We have, like the Bowflex dumbbells that, you can adjust them to, from I think it's like 10 pounds to 55 pounds. We have a rack that, I'm not even sure what they're called, but, so you got the free weights in there. We got the barbells, we got free weights, and then I have like a pull down machine that's kind of connected with it. So we have, I guess, what's needed, nothing too much. The whole cable cross thing, I wish we had one of those, because those things, you can do hundreds of different exercises on one of those.
Absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, we have a Peloton that I've jumped on once. You know, that's my wife's toy. But yeah, I mean, we set a room just for that. I mean, she likes to work out a lot. You know, I wish I liked to work out more than I do. You know, it always seems like every time I start working out, I injure something, you know, and you know, I get on a roll, I'm going good, and then my knee gives out, or, you know, it's my hamstring. It's always something with me. And probably due in part of that, I'm probably not doing everything exactly the way it probably should be done. And partly, you know, I've had 3 knee surgeries, you know, all microfractures, and, you know, so it's just, sometimes it's tough to work around for me personally, some of that stuff you know, that I wish I could do.
So maybe let's talk about that for a minute, right? So I just turned 44 2 days ago. See,
Happy birthday.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for me, it's like I have a 44-year-old body with like a 20-year-old mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm at about, yeah, I'm kind of rolling, you know, things are good. Yeah, feeling good. And then you push a little too much, and then I'm down. So, Jason, for you in working with clients, and maybe specifically, you know, former professional athletes like Mike, how do you approach that? Because I think I shared this with you before, and I heard this saying, and I think it's so true. When you're young, you work out and you get sore. When you get older, maybe our collective ages, right? If you don't work out, you get sore. So how do you work with former athletes, somebody like Mike, to kind of help, you know, keep them physically active, physically fit, keep them out of that pain zone, but also being mindful of former injuries and making sure that we don't aggravate those sorts of things? How do you handle that stuff? Because I know you got one in particular that's pretty well known that you've done that with.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my specialty is honestly working with the guys post career. Whether it's I've worked with Troy Aikman for about 14 years. Jason Arnott, who he was actually the guy that scored the Stanley Cup winning goal against the Dallas Stars for the New Jersey Devils. 18 years in the NHL. He's my age, 45. Just retired a few years ago. But I mean, these guys. You know, honestly, I think they're the people that need the most attention because, you know, if they still have the will to stay active, which that's a big hurdle for ex-athletes. I mean, these guys like Mike have been in athletics and been, you know, pushing themselves and being pushed from the time they were 7 years old to the time they retire. If they've had the genetics and the superior structure to make it that far, which is unbelievable in and of itself. But a lot of times, you know, by the time you get to where, you know, Mike's at in his career, I mean, a lot of it's mental too. You're done, man. I mean, it's just like, and you have to take on a whole paradigm shift, and it's not about performance anymore. It's about just, you know, maintaining that earth suit as long as you can, you know, and staying functional. Because once you've reached a certain point in your career and your life, now you've crossed a couple major hurdles in your life where, you know, you've achieved enough to where now you have a little more downtime, whether it's to enjoy time with your kids and just get out and try to play some golf. And if the thing that you worked so hard to achieve, have a little downtime, and you actually get the time to enjoy it, now your body's in a state where every time you swing a golf club, your back hurts or your knee hurts, you know. And for somebody like Mike, who's been through his number of surgeries, which most of my guys have, if you've had a prolonged career, you have definitely had some orthopedic challenges, you know. And it's not just, you know, once you get out of the game, all those quick fixes that they use to keep you in the game, especially when you're at the professional or even at the collegiate level, you know, it's about getting you back on the field, you know, because it's about winning. It's about, you know, a paycheck, whether it's the coaches in college or it's you as a professional. I mean, and you do whatever it takes to get back on the mound, get it back on the field, because that's your livelihood, you know. But once that's done, now you're talking about just trying to maintain your body so you could get out there and play catch with your kids. You can play around the golf with your kids, you know, and you can just enjoy life, getting out of bed without pain in the morning. That shouldn't be, you would think that wouldn't be the goal. But man, after you've been through the grinder, like guys like Mike have, your body's beat up, man. And and you got to really start listening to it on a whole nother level. I mean, those antennae have to go up so high. And the good thing is people that have been in Mike's place, they're so in tune to their body. And when you are working with someone that's on a level of a professional athlete, they can tell you things and transmit things to you verbally that you don't have to really dig for and look for as a fitness professional, because they're so in tune with their body. And you can ask them, like, what kind of stigma do you have with exercise? Like, man, I don't like to do barbell squats because, I did this in the training room one time, hurt my back, and I just kind of stay away from them. Or, and you want to listen, and you can get a lot of feedback, and it's about, building trust and letting them trust their body again, and that they can just move and do certain things now with the given strength that you provided them without getting injured. Because, man, it's just, you want to steer away from injury if you've been in athletics that long. And you just want to try to get up and play around the golf without, feeling like you got to sit in an ice tub for 3 hours the next day when you wake up. And that's a reality for a lot of guys in Mike's position.
Yeah. I mean, I think with me personally, I think you hit the nail right on the head on that one. As far as, I went 15 years, straight of, having to work out. And then once I got done, it was like, I don't want to work out ever again. Like I've been doing this for 15 years straight, so my first couple of years of not playing, it was like, I'm not doing nothing. Like I've done it so long that I'm burnt out on it. I don't want to do nothing. And then, a couple of years afterwards, I was like, okay, I need to start working back out again, starting to get the bad dad bod, and then also it was like, I worked so hard from, being injured and stuff like that now I was doing nothing, and I'm starting to get injured, not doing nothing. And it was almost like my body was breaking down more afterwards, in my post-playing career. And another thing, like you said, is, you have that fear of hurting also, working out and hurting yourself and stuff like that, that kind of gets in the back of your head. Like, I don't want to do this because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself doing this, and then you're kind of trying to balance, okay, do I work out? Do I not work out? What do I got to do, just to stay healthy? I mean, I went through periods of time where, getting out of bed, I was just like, oh God, like, rolling over, my back's hurting, and trying to find out how to, I guess, take those pains away. I found a stretch program that kind of worked for me. But I mean, 5 weeks ago, I had disc replacement surgery, so I mean, it's like I'm continuing to have these injuries and surgeries and it's probably all from my playing career also. But, like you said, I mean, it's just one thing after another, and trying to find that balance of staying healthy and keeping your body in tune. I'll go play golf, and the next day I'm paying for it, just so it's a tough one.
So to that point, Mike, if you and I are going to play golf together, I want to play on the back end of a back-to-back for you, so you make sure and play 18 or 36 holes the day before.
Yeah.
So, my game maybe catch up with yours a little bit.
Yeah, it's we're playing golf on Thursday, me and some buddies, and today's Tuesday, so I've already started like my stretch program. I mean, here's the bad thing: I'm not consistent enough where I maintain everything. So it's like, if I know I'm going to play golf, I start stretching a few days ahead of time, just so, during my round of golf, I can get through the full 18 without hurting. And then I'll stretch a couple of days afterwards, and then I'll take a couple of days off. And, so I just need, I'm one of those guys that doesn't maintain as much as I probably should. So Jason, I guess, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're working with somebody like Mike, understanding, 15 years, multiple surgeries, different place in his life now. And I think a lot of the things, and Mike agreed, is, hey, being able to play golf and not, not feel like you got ran over by a Mack truck the next day, being able to get out and play ball, with his kids in general, and understanding each individual is different, but in general, like, how would you approach working with somebody like that? You talked about different modalities. Would it be more mobility than strength, equal parts strength, mobility? And I'm just curious, how would you handle something like that to keep somebody like Mike, kind of rolling along at his advanced age?
Well, and it's funny you said the last little phrase you just said is such a true statement when you work with ex-professional athletes, because their tires may be the same age as ours, but the amount of mileage on those tires is exponential.
Hey, Jason, anybody ever told you look like John Kitna?
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
You see that, Mike?
You made him leave.
Hey, good looking dude.
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So John Kitna, you guys, yeah.
I'm just about a foot shorter than John Kitna.
Yeah.
On the screen, you looked about the same height.
Perfect. I should do all my meetings like this. That's awesome.
Dude, look, last time you and I saw each other, you were closer to me with this nasty thing.
Oh,
and
man.
I was closer to you. Like, what happened to your beard, man?
I mean, I was like down to here, just enormous. And I'd had it. I'd had it in terms of just like stuff hanging off my face. And I was like, I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. It's, well, when we get done up here in Colorado, this is going to get knocked down about 3 or 4 notches at least. The worst part, dude, and I don't know if you ever had this, but like when I eat, sometimes I chew on the hair, which is not a real pleasant experience.
That's so disgusting, man. I had the exact same thing, and I would get the scissors and trim it all up, and one of my friends would call it my soup strainer. I was like, that's it, I'm done. It's just so disgusting. I mean, when you wipe your face and stuff falls out of your face like 2 hours after eating, I was like, okay, I'm over it. Yeah, I'm done trying to look like a lumberjack. I'm just done. I did that I had that for probably 7 years. It just kept getting bigger, bigger, bigger.
Yeah, that's the picture I saw online of you with the big.
Oh, see, man, that wasn't even a big one.
The one that's online? Yeah.
Yeah, that's not even the big one.
Did you guys ever see the Family Guy episode where the dad, where Peter grew out this beard and then a bird nested in it and laid egg?
I saw
and
that.
The bird was like an endangered species, so he couldn't remove it, right? He couldn't get rid of it. Like its habitat, like if it tried to eat something, the bird would, jump out and, take the food off. Yeah, I kind of feel like that. The other night, my wife took it and put this in a ponytail, for the kids.
Captain Lou.
Yeah, Lou Albano. But if I keep going, I've got my own COVID mask, man. Huh?
See, that's perfect.
Yeah, this thing's got to go though. It's pretty gnarly. So anyway, so we were talking about about somebody like Mike that enjoys playing golf, wants to be active. I assume, Mike, right? Spend time with your kids, get out and play ball, and do stuff like that. So mobility, strength. How do you approach that stuff? Because as you were saying, right, somebody like Mike, he's probably got quite a few miles on his tires there.
Absolutely. I mean, first thing we do is I need to gain whoever I'm working with, regardless of whether it's someone who's never worked out before or a professional athlete. And I think anyone that's been at the level that Mike has been the biggest hurdle to cross, honestly, is trust. Getting them to trust me that I'm not going to hurt them again, or that I know what I'm doing to work with the different modalities, or they may have a stigma attached to a certain modality. A couple of the guys that I've worked with got injured in their actual weight rooms while they're professional athletes. They're like, man, I don't want to do any of this, or I don't want to do any of that. And once the trust is gained, and it's all about, number one, it's, making their joints, everything function to the highest capacity possible, working within those kinesiological norms, the new norms that have been kind of defined by whatever types of orthopedic procedures they've had, because those are completely different. Depending upon what type of surgery they've had. Like, Mike, I'm not sure if you just had like a microdiscectomy, or if you had, something actually fused or anything like that. But I mean, those are completely different. I need to know what kind of procedures they've had, where they're at post-operative, how they're functioning right now. And then moving forward, I mean, I don't look at them as restrictions. I look at them as just, different things. There's going to be more of a mental stigma attached to a lot of those things. And, of course, we're going to have to work within the framework of whatever type of procedure that person may have had. But it's all about getting people stronger and, allowing their joints to function, in as broad a range as possible in terms of range of motion, pain-free range of motion. But there's such a big, I heard Mike mention flexibility one point, and it's been such a big controversy with flexibility, because, we used to think that, if someone couldn't achieve certain positions, it's because things were too tight. We had to stretch and lengthen these things, where we now know, and a lot of the current research, supports the fact that many of the reasons you can't get into certain ranges is because there's a weakness there, and we need to strengthen things up. And that's one of the things that was such a big misnomer with golf. I use that sport because, you'd hear so many golfers, old school, talk about how they didn't want to lift weights because it would decrease their flexibility, and, they need to work on rotation and blah, 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 all this stuff, where in effect, a lot of it is just getting people stronger, strengthening people through certain ranges of motion, because if you are not moving through certain ranges while under load, you're never going to develop strength in that range. So it's to say, if you can stretch someone passively and they can turn to a certain degree while they're being stretched, or while they're holding something and turning, it doesn't mean that they've developed any strength in that range. So you should never allow passive range of motion to exceed active range of motion. So we work through broad ranges of motion under load, and we just need to understand what ranges in that motion need to be more adapted to the weakness of the position. So we change the load to accommodate whatever the strength in that particular position is. So it's not necessarily the position that will get you hurt, it's the load that you choose to use while in that position. So when you understand some of these basic rules of physics and biomechanics, then it starts to help you implement, strengthening, programs for people. They're like, oh, well, my doctor always told me not to do a squat below this. I'm like, well, sure, if you have 135 pounds on your back, but, what about with your body weight? Or what about for guys that are really tall and have these long levers like Mike? How do we make them a better squatter? How do we understand their lever systems as, they work, and how can I adapt that exercise to suit someone like Mike versus someone like myself? So when you understand those basic rules of biomechanics and lever systems, then you start to understand the actual, science behind those things, and you can change and manipulate any routine to suit any body, regardless of what kind of condition it's in orthopedically.
So kind of just speaking on, like, where you're talking about, the bulking up and tightening up and not being able to rotate and stuff like that. So one of the, I guess, I'm not even sure. I mean, maybe it's a stigma, maybe it's true, I don't know. But like for pitchers, they say, don't bulk up, don't get strong, because you can lose your flexibility and you're not going to have your same range of motion for pitching.
Sure.
Is that a stigma? Is there a truth to that? I mean, is it dependent on every individual?
Well, I think without a doubt, I mean, rotation is for any sport that involves rotation. So the two top, the food chain sports that involve rotation are baseball and golf. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about, people always use Tiger as like it's like, oh, Tiger, the amount of rotation that he could achieve. It's like, but you look at these different swing coaches that Tiger went through, whether it was Butch Harmon in the early days, Hank Keeney, they changed it, all these things. And because each one of those guys understood that Tiger's swing when he was 16 wasn't the same when he was 36. And the reason being is because of all those orthopedic challenges that have been incurred as a result of that extreme rotation. So when you look at golf, it's always their knee and their back, their plant foot, because when you look down at a golfer and you see that forefoot, it's almost internally rotated a little bit like this, and it stays stuck there. When they come through with that big club head, it comes all the way around, and their knee and their foot is pointed the other direction. Brother, your knee does not work like that, okay? So that only lasts for so long, and as soon as that tissue wears out, well, then you got a bad knee. Well, then you got a bad back. And that's just slow erosion over time. And the guys that last that long, the only reason why Tiger lasted as long as he did is because he was genetically superior. Yeah. You know, as is every professional athlete. If you've made it from where you're at, like Pony League baseball to major leagues, the amount of stress that body has endured by the time they get up there, especially pitchers. You think about how young and when they start to, you know, look at, I mean, just recently, you know, the last few years, they talk about pitch count and all the stuff, how they're trying to like save people for different times of the year. Well, it's like, man, listen, there's only so much, you know, stress your body can take before it just gives out, you know? And, you know, people talk about Tommy John surgery and, oh, this guy came back even stronger after Tommy John. Bullshit. Okay. I'm going to call BS on that, dude. I'm like, listen, that person may have been a lot more resilient and they may have just learned how to throw that ball after having all that stuff changed in their shoulder. But it's never the same. And anybody that's dealt with the kind of injuries you have, you know that it's like, you can't go back to doing stuff the exact way you did it before that injury. You got to figure out how to do it now with that new range of motion that now you've been limited to based on that surgery, you know, and you got your parameters change constantly. So that's what we have to do. And I do that with every single client, regardless of whether they're a professional athlete or a housewife. It's like, listen, everybody's had different wear and tear. The housewife may have, you know, something tore her shoulder. I see a lot with women playing tennis and whatnot or getting into golf, and they hurt their back because they don't have the conditioning that an athlete has. But they're going to go out there and they're going to swing that club head around the same way, and they're going to rupture a disc or they're going to blow out their knee, you know? So we work with all those things. And the simple rule of thumb is the stronger you are, the more resilient your body is to all of those injuries. So strength is the magic elixir to everything, every injury that you could possibly incur. The only way for us to make you more resilient to those injuries is to strengthen the active system. Your muscular system is your primary tension regulator for every single thing you do. So for you, when you throw a ball and you bring that thing back and you're coming forward, I mean, that it's that back to front that is where all that, you know, they talk about where the pop and the pitch is, and what's that, you bringing that ball back and relying on all that elasticity and dynamic tissue to snap that thing forward like that. Well, once your arm is up like this and you go back into the external rotation, that is the most stable position for your shoulder to be in. Abduction, 90 degrees, external rotation, 90 degrees, as long as you don't have a force pushing you into, which is exactly what you did, you know, a million times a season, because you're relying on that snap back to forward like this to give you a lot of what you do when that ball is transferred forward, you know? So you're talking about throwing your arm back as hard as you can, producing as much force into that position that you shouldn't have any force pushed into, to rely on the dynamic properties of the tissue to project that ball forward. And you can only do that so many times before your body's just like, all right, we're done, you know? So we work with all those things, knowing the type of stresses you've had on your body. Well, the things I'm going to do with you in certain positions with your shoulder, are just going to be more limited based on some of the, you know, orthopedic limitations you're going to have in there, you know, and how many surgeries you've had in there, you know, and I'm like, okay, certain ranges of motion are going to be more stressful for you. And I know that I need to work on certain ranges of strength that are going to give you the ability to, you know, not do this, but when you pick that club up, come back like this, you know, makes a big difference, you know? So making you feel comfortable knowing that when you bring that club head back this way and you come forward the next day, you're not going to feel like you've got a meat sock hanging from your shoulder, you know?
Yeah.
But you know that feeling, you know exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, you know?
Yeah.
That was after a game, you're sitting there with ice and it's just like something is hanging from your shoulder. You're just done, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we take all that into consideration, you know, and just know that everyone experiences that to a certain degree. You know, we look at the circumstances, we look at what they're trying to achieve. We put those goals into achievable, you know, bite-sized portions, and we kind of just feed that to everybody as they go. But, it's all about, we talk about specialization of exercise. We look at all these different things you want to do. And there's so many people that specialize in certain little things, whereas every single piece of motion is a chain of a lot of little things. So we strengthen all those little things. We can break them down into segments, but then ultimately we've got to pull all those links back together and work in a big kinetic motion again. So unless you do that, then you're doing it wrong. So that's the part that a lot of people leave off. They're like, they focus on these little pieces, but like, unless all those little pieces add to the greater good in that big motion, then it's pointless.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Jace, working with former athletes that have had maybe injuries as a result of different, maybe weightlifting exercises, whatever the case may be. And with Troy, as an example, for the longest time, I thought the reason he retired was because of hits like he took from LeVar Arrington, which is still one of the nastiest hits I've ever seen, when he just depleted him on the sideline. Yeah. But then I heard Troy talk about, I don't know, it wasn't the concussions, right? And then the way I found out about Jason was I came across an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was, where they had did a feature story on Troy, and he mentioned you and working with you. So I think his primary thing that drove him to retirement was what he hurt his back. Was it squatting?
Yes.
Or deadlifting, something like that?
Yeah.
When he was
barbell squats in the weight room at Cowboys facility, and and a lot of that is, it was the first thing when I met him very first time. He was just like, I don't want to do any legs. He didn't want to do any lower body stuff, period. He was just like, that's how he had this big stigma attached to what he was doing. His biggest fear was just like Mike said, he's like, man, I don't want to be the ex-athlete that's 80 pounds overweight, So when I first met him, all he was doing was like 6 days a week of like an hour on his step mill, like cardio, because he was just so fearful of putting on weight after retirement. And, their bodies are just beat up, and just like Mike said, it's like, the last thing they want to do is get in a weight room. They're like, dude, I don't want to do that anymore, but it's just like a transition. It's like, because the routines and getting an athlete out of the mindset of performance-based training, it's a completely different approach to fitness now. It has nothing to do with, game day performance. It has to do with, everyday performance. You just, as soon as your feet hit the ground, not shuffling, doing the old man shuffle to the bathroom in the morning and letting the oil kind of warm up in the pan like an old 57 Chevy, then finally everything gets moving. And now you're okay about an hour after you get out of bed, But that's a tough transition to make. It's a big paradigm shift. And once that's made, and the strength starts to come back and we get some of the weight off, and that's when you realize, we only got one set of tires, and you have to keep those tires rotated. And, when you've gone through the amount of stress that an athlete has, mechanical joint wear is something you have to constantly manage in the weight room with any type of workout. That's one of the things that I always make reference to is mechanical joint wear, and, making sure that that's distributed as evenly as possible when you start to talk about the large synovial joints, the knees, the hips, the elbows, the shoulders, because those are the things that once motion starts to become inhibited, then, if it's painful, people just don't go there. It's like, it's that, like, it hurts when I pick my arm up like this. It's like, oh, well, don't do that. All right. Well, that's a problem, because every time we just limit the amount of, active range of motion we have, you start to get weaker and weaker. And not only that, but it's like it starts to affect things like posture, and then we're stuck as we get a little older in these seated positions, whether you're doing business, you're on a plane, you're in the car, and all those injuries, once that musculature starts to atrophy, it's the only thing that's keeping you together. And then, just like Mike said, it's like you're starting to get hurt doing stuff like bending over and picking up a pencil. It's like, oh my God, my back, which is, it's hard to come to grips with after, being in probably some of the best shape of your life. And you just, it's something you got to fight every single day. And it's just a habit. You got to get back in the habit of doing it. And it's on a totally different level, but the return on that is you just feel better, and feel better just in terms of your normal function. You sitting down and being able to bend over and put your shoes on without your back hurting and stuff like that. I mean, it reach back and get your seatbelt buckled without your shoulder hurting. I mean, it's a real thing, you know, and I use those examples because those are things that people talk about. I'm like, dude, I just want to be able to reach back and put my damn seatbelt on without my shoulder, you know, getting this searing pain in my shoulder. I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, I mean, so like
ahead,
one example is my dad. He, you know, years back, he, you know, was having all these back issues, back pain. You know, it wasn't doing nothing to work out, you know, to strengthen or anything like that. He was just kind of basically, you know, went to the doctor and getting pain pills to kind of hide all that stuff. You know, and I mean, and not just him. This is a thing that many people kind of deal with, and they mask the pain with pills or other stuff. So obviously financially, there's lots of people that can't afford to, you know, go to a gym or have a personal trainer and stuff like that. What are, I guess, maybe 3 to 5 exercises that you would say, you know what, these are the 3 or these are the 5 exercises that I would just highly recommend for an everyday healthy lifestyle?
I mean, that's a great question. And it's so, you know, people start to go too deep down the rabbit hole with exercise because there's only 100 million resources now. I mean, all I do is pick up your phone and Google whatever, and you got, you know, 500 people telling you what you should be doing and whatnot. But I mean, what people have to realize is that all motion is one of 3 things, or a derivative of one of 3 things. And that is a push, a pull, and a squat. Everything you do in life is a derivative of one of those 3 or a combination of one of those 3. So what I try to get people to understand is, you know, it's not about reinventing the wheel. You know, when I start to implement a program for someone like your dad, it's real simple. They're like, oh, well, I always heard squats weren't good for you. I'm like, okay. I'm like, or how do you get off the toilet in the morning? You know, I mean, simple. How do you get off the couch? How do you get out of the chair? It's the same thing. You'd be amazed how many times I talk to people that are of a certain age, or maybe they just had, you know, bilateral knee replacement and they're just in pain, and just getting out of a chair. I mean, they don't like to go out to eat because they can't get out of the chair. They've been sitting down too long. Teaching them how to do that. Teaching them how to change their stance so they can stand up out of a chair without assistance and things of that nature. I mean, they're life-changing things. They sound so minuscule to people like us, but when you witness your parents, you know, struggle with something like that. You know, my mother had MS for 20 years, so I had to constantly work with her and develop fitness routines for her, because one of the biggest things to offset the symptoms of multiple sclerosis is exercise. You know, just getting her to move and things like that. She was, oh my gosh, it feels so much better. So I would teach her how to do a squat, like coming off of a chair. I'd get her to sit right in a chair and just teach her how to put her feet and change her stance a little bit, and, you know, use her body by sticking her arms out in front of her to kind of counterweight any of the posterior weight, things of that nature, to help her just stand up out of the chair. And I mean, I'd have her do like 15 of these combined with like 15 like wall push-ups, or I'd put her in a corner and have her do just little push-ups, you know, nothing where their elbows are too high and playing their shoulder, but down a little bit. It's just like anyone with shoulder issues, the higher you get, to closer you get to the parallel to the plane of the shoulder, the tougher it is on your shoulder. That's why so many times we start to move people down out of that horizontal plane and put in what we refer to as a scapular plane, or this 45-degree kind of plane off of your spine, which is a lot easier for your shoulder to do through any kind of pushing motion. That, and then I give her a piece of tubing and she latch it around something that's got a little bit of weight to it, and she would just do a row with a piece of tubing. Just those 3 things. I'd have her do 3 sets of like 15 to 20, and I'd have her do that 3 to 4 times a week. And then I'd wait for her to come back to me. So, you know what, I've been doing that for the last couple of weeks. I could definitely see the difference. It's easier for me to get off the chair. You know, I notice it when I do things like carrying groceries and stuff like that. It's these strange little things that seem to be so asinine to people like us. But when you have somebody come back and tell you how much value you added to their life by being able to carry more than 1 bag of groceries from their car to their house, you're like, wow. I mean, things that we take for granted every day are just these simple examples of an increase in strength and how that can add to just the, the daily mode of operations for everybody that just like, man, I just want to be able to carry my groceries from my car to the house. That's it. I'm not looking to compete in a bodybuilding show or anything, and I mean, but it's those kinds of daily examples of strength and improvement of strength and how much that adds value to their lives. And I'm just waiting for her to come back and say, hey, I've been doing that for the last 3 weeks. I could definitely notice a difference. If I wanted to add 2 exercises to that, what would it be? I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to, you see so many people, or people like your father or people like my mother, or that age group, are like, what are just a few things I could do? And the first thing you do is like, well, I'm going to have you lay down on the ground. I'm like, dude, I just told you I can't even get out of a chair. How the hell do you want me to get off the floor? It's like, so people they go right to what we do is such a protocol-based business. It's just like physical therapy. It's like you go in for a procedure. When you go to see the physical therapist, they open a book and it says from weeks 1 to 6, Mike's going to do this, this, and this. And then I'm going to make him do a little test. And if he tests okay, then I'm going to flip it up to the next chapter. And weeks 6 to 8, we're going to do this, this, and this. You know what I mean? That's not the way people work. People aren't robots. You don't just program them. And, once they give you the desired output, you program them again. It's like you have to listen to feedback. And if that just tells you that you weren't listening to a thing I said, it's like, I just told you I can't even stand up out of a chair. Now you just told me to start off by laying down on the floor. Are you going to pick me up every time I try to do this at my house? I mean, so you have to think a little bit more outside the box, that we develop different exercises that we could challenge those muscles that flex the trunk, extend the trunk, rotate the torso. So all those muscles that we would do by doing crunches and these side bend type of things, but we challenge them isometrically. We challenge them by presenting different forces. Like if I'm going to give a piece of tubing and I'm standing here facing the camera, and that tubing is pulling perpendicular to the position I'm facing. So it's trying to pull me this way. And all I'm doing is I'm just pushing it away from me and pushing back this way. So it's trying to twist me this way. So I'm working all of these oblique muscles here on the side externally just by pushing this thing out. But there's no change in range of motion. So I get to challenge all these muscles that add to core stability without doing the one thing that could possibly injure me, which is rotate my spine. So I'm still able to turn on all those muscles by having them resist a force as opposed to create a force. So you just have to use, that's the part that a lot of people, in my industry, they developed all these muscles on their body, but the one muscle they fail to develop is their head muscle. So you got to be able to use your brain, think outside the box, and start to develop these exercises for people, based on the individual and the challenges they present and the goals that they're trying to achieve in their life, not the ones that you're trying to achieve as a fitness person. So you just have to be a little bit more attentive to someone's needs and have enough knowledge to create exercises that are going to service those needs.
Yeah. Very much. Cause I do. I remember doing that one right there. And that one's a killer. That one's a killer.
You bet. Yeah.
But I back to what you're saying, adjusting your programs to each individual. I do pitching lessons and, I don't have I want you to throw exactly like this. You have to tailor everything to each individual. Usually your basis is pretty much the same, or for me it is, but I'm like, okay, but every kid doesn't have the same arm slot. They don't have the same motion. So you have to tailor different stuff to each individual. And, I think that's where, like you said, some trainers get stuck with, okay, well, this is how I work out, so this is how I want you to work out.
Exactly.
I know professional pitching coaches that had that same mentality. Well, hey, this is how I would do it, so this is how I want you to do it. Instead of, okay, let's see what you got. Let's get us a base, and then go from there, and then kind of add what you have, and we'll tailor it to kind of mesh together.
That's exactly right. And what you're saying is such a great, and that's what I've seen at the strength and conditioning level, even in some of the professional locker rooms, whether it's hockey or NFL. And you see a lot of these strength conditioning coaches, and they take, because you guys are who you are, what they do is they're like, well, these guys could take it, so I'm going to pound them, and it's just like, dude, I'm like, these are the guys that have been beat up more than anybody else, It's like, you need to really develop individual programs but just think about coming up. It was like, all right, all pitchers are going to do this, all the catchers are going to do this. I'm like, dude, you've got I just looked at your pitching staff. It's like you got one guy that's 5'10", another guy that's 6'4". You know, one guy that's had 4 surgeries, another guy that's had none, and you're telling me they're all going to do the same thing? I'm like, that's laziness is what that is, you know? And it's like, you know, and these are the people, you know, I've done segments, and I talked a little bit about this with Russell, the first podcast we did a couple of years ago. These are the people that are working with, they're either working with professional athletes or they're working with your kids. That's the scary part. These are the people that are working with your children. They're not spending the time to look at them and say, do the things like you're talking about, you know, which is like, listen, there's a foundation. And then it's my job as your pitching coach to see, you know, what are those subtle differences that you present and how can I make this process suit you? Not how do I make you suit this process? It's like, because then you have to rack your brain and all the knowledge you have to figure out what can I do to make this work for him, you know? And that's why coaching is such a, I mean, I think you have great coaches and you have coaches that are just, so we've all had them if you've been an athlete. And those are the guys you look back at, you know, throughout your career, regardless of whether it was just high school, college, and you've gone all the way to the pros, and you could probably look at 3 fingers and think of 3 coaches that over the course of your career, you're like, these are the best coaches I ever had. You know, these are the guys that, you know, knew not just what to do with me from a technique standpoint and how to make those changes, but they knew how to motivate me. You know, they knew how to talk to me. When I was having a rough day, they knew how to, I mean, all those things come into play regardless of who you're working with, whether it's a kid or a professional athlete. You know, and you have to know how to tailor those things custom to every single kid. It's like I have a saying in my profession that every hour is a new job. You know, I don't do cookie cutter things for anybody. You know, I'm that person I need to be for that one individual, you know, for that 1 hour. And as soon as that minute hand hits the 12, the next person comes in and I give my head a big shake like a big etch a sketch, and I turn into who I need to be for the next person based on everything that they're walking in the door with, you know. And that could vary and change depending upon what kind of day they just had. Maybe they just got laid off. You know, maybe they're having trouble at home or something like that. And I need to, you know, you need to take all that into account before you just, you know, try to do what you need to do with them that day. Because maybe you had the perfect plan laid out for them, you know, and you're like, man, I was thinking about this all week. I wrote this thing up for you. We're going to be doing this. And they come in the door and they're just not there. And you got to change everything, you know. So there's so many more variables to that equation, whether it's exercise-wise or any of those other hats you got to wear, being a coach, a trainer, a parent, any of those things. I mean, you got to do all those things. And it could vary. As a parent, it could vary by the hour, you know. I mean, so it's just the way it works, you know. But, I mean, I think it's one of the toughest jobs that you have, you know, being a coach or being with somebody that works with individuals. But it's going to be one of the most rewarding when you put the effort in and, you know, you see your client, your kid, you know, your dad, you know, see any of those people come back and they're like, wow, man, that made a big difference. You know, I felt better this last week. I did those couple of things that you were telling me to do. And just these last few weeks, I feel a lot stronger from it. I mean, it's worth the effort.
Yeah.
When you were playing, did you work with anybody like Jason, or did you primarily rely on the strength and conditioning staff of the Rangers or the Phillies or the Padres, Brewers, whatever the case may be?
I didn't start working with a trainer until towards the end of my career. Early on, they would send us with a booklet that kind of gave us workouts. And I would kind of, you know, just kind of do some of their stuff, do some of my own stuff. Didn't really have a true program. But as I got older and, you know, I kind of started realizing, okay, you know what, I need somebody that's going to really put together a program for me that's going to suit me, my body a lot better. And that was really my last 3 years, I guess. So before that, it was more of, I was just kind of, you know, muscle fitness magazine, looking through there and just trying to strengthen up through that. But yeah, go ahead.
And this is not a slight at you. This goes back to what Jason was saying, right? So here you have a professional sports organization that has invested millions of dollars into you guys, right? And yes, they have a strength and conditioning staff, but how much of that, to Jason's point, is cookie cutter stuff, as opposed to how much of it is truly dialed into Mike? This is Mike's program and Mike's program only. Nobody else should be using it. Mike shouldn't be following anybody else's program. Like, this is dialed in for you? I mean, it's amazing to me in this day and age, especially with the amount of information that's available, that somebody like yourself would have to turn to something like Muscle and Fitness, which an average Joe like me does, if you can't tell. No, I'm just kidding. But that's just crazy that's the way that it would be. Has it changed at all since you got out of the game? Do you know? Or did it get better still in your career?
It's definitely gotten better. I mean, definitely gotten better. I mean, had I, like, let's just say if I was living here when I was playing for the Rangers, they have their strength coach that on a weekly basis, he's up at the facilities. And if you live around here, you can go there and you can work out, and he puts the programs together for you. But when I was playing, I was always going back down to South Texas after the season. So I never really truly lived in the city I was playing in until my last year of Texas. And then at the end of the season, I wasn't part of the organization no more. So unfortunately, I mean, I wasn't able to still go to the facilities. But when I was in Philly, they didn't have that either. They didn't have the guys at the training facilities, hey, you can come out here and work out and stuff like that. When I was young, early in my career, like I said, they would give you a booklet. They give pitchers one booklet, and they give position players one booklet. And here's your week by week, cookie cutter workout, So it was, but it's come a long ways. I mean, now they have the whole nutrition stuff. I mean, it's light years from when I was still playing. I mean, at the end of my career, there's been, some organizations were really starting to get into the really the health side of everything, the nutrition and all that. When I was in Philly, I mean, they were basically starving us. I mean, it was like they didn't want to keep food in the clubhouse, and their reasoning B, the GM's reasoning B, was he didn't want people hanging out at the clubhouse. I was like, well, how much sense does that make? Don't you want your guys here at the clubhouse? And he goes, no, I don't want y'all here hanging out, just messing around. So you come here to work. I'm like, well, you come here to work. Exactly. You come here, you get fed, you work out, you want the guys to be here. You don't want them not to be here. I mean, it was, I didn't want to get on Philly. That was a horrible, horrible organization when I was there. But
different topic for a different show, huh?
Oh my gosh. But just like Jason was saying, I mean, you have to tailor everything to each individual. I mean, even, I heard you, you were talking about the young athletes. To start putting together some sort of workout plan and stuff like that. I know when I was younger, it was always the whole thing was you don't want to start working out because it's going to stunt your growth and something like that.
Sure. Oh yeah. It's, and it's still, there are certain things that we talk about with youth athletes, and there's that magic age of 13 to 14 that we talk about. And it's funny because you start to think about it in terms of Texas. I mean, me growing up here in Texas, and we couldn't wait for school-sponsored sports in 7th grade because we could actually get in the weight room and work out with the weights and whatnot. But it was right when you started to turn 13 or 14, and you see a lot of fitness facilities that kind of use that age as the magic age, like no one under 14 unsupervised in the gym or whatnot. And one of the reasons why that they use that example or that age range is because that's typically where you hear so many people make reference to their growth plates, and they're so concerned about having any kind of injury to growth plates. And we're talking the technical term for those are epiphyseal plates. And we talk about them associated with the ankle and the wrist. It's like when they're trying to, your son goes in and we're like, all right, man, is my son going to be 6'4"? Let's go see, and so they get an x-ray and they take an x-ray of his wrist. And they do that to see how much space there is between the epiphyseal plates or the growth plates. So the closer those things get, the lesser his chances are of being 6'7", I mean, so, being the next Randy Johnson or something like that, he may fall short like mine. I mean, I peaked height-wise in like 9th grade, man. I mean, it was like, I've been 5'9" since I've been in 9th grade, whereas my little brother, I mean, he's 2 years younger than me, kid's 6'2", 258, he's a monster, but we would do that. And that's the biggest scare is an injury or a fracture to epiphyseal plates. So typically that age is where they start to say, okay, well, that long bone growth is starting to kind of, slow down a little bit. He's definitely not near hitting their potential in terms of height, but it's not this crazy bone growth that's going up through like the lower levels of adolescence are, so that's when the workouts kick in, and but you got to be really careful because, there are different levels of working out that you could do based upon age ranges. And you really have to understand what those are, and just in terms of like neural learning and things of that nature. So, I mean, I worked with kids as young as 8 years old. And what we do with them is I call it organized play. And it's really a lot of hand-eye coordination. I get a medicine ball and I roll it one direction. They have to run to there and grab it and throw it back to me. And, just catching things, or I'll, parents will think I'm nuts. They'll see me in the gym with like their 8-year-old kid, and there's a big heavy bag sitting in front of them, like hanging from the ceiling, thinking I'm going to have them punch this thing, where all I'm going to have them do is they're going to wrap their arms and legs around that thing, and they're going to hang on to it. And I give a little push, and we time like a game to see how long they can hang on to it but that's a strength exercise, So it has to be fun, and just like little 30-minute sessions. But I've had kids that I've worked with from 9 years old all the way up through, I've got, 3 kids that played college lacrosse, national championship teams on, North Carolina, 3 kids on the HP, 3-time in a row state championship football teams. 2 of them were playing lacrosse in college. The other one's playing, college football at Brown. I mean, so, and I work with these kids ever since they were just little tiny guys doing silly stuff like that, and then we just try to step it up. But it's really important you understand, the different levels of stressors and whatnot you can put on these kids at different ages, because you can really mess them up.
Yeah. So we were up in Marble, Colorado yesterday, and the town of Marble, believe it or not, they still mine marble out of that place. And so we stop at this little barbecue restaurant out in the middle of nowhere, and they have just scrap pieces of marble laying around. So my son picks up a couple pieces of it, and he's playing around with it. He looks at his hands, and he's like, "Look, Dad, look." He's like, I got that stuff in my hand. Now I can go over here and do pull-ups. He's in our garage.
Get the chalk.
Yeah.
So here's my 6-year-old little guy, right? And he's banging those things to get chalk to come out of it, and then he's rubbing that in his hands, and he's looking at it, and then he walks over to the kind of elevated patio thing they have off the side of the restaurant, and he's over there trying to do, pull-ups and chin-ups. But
that's awesome.
It's funny because he's 6, and every once in a while he'll come out in the garage and he wants to kind of work out with me, and I just, I don't really give him any weights. If you want to grab that little bar and see if you can do a chin up or something, then
sure,
go for it. But I could see that, especially with super competitive parents who try to push their kids a little bit too early into the weight training thing.
This is the state for it, man.
At a barbecue restaurant.
This is the area for it.
Oh man, you ain't lying. I mean, anybody that's worked with kids in this area, it's typically not the kids you have to manage, it's the parents, and you got to think about that, because you remember when you were a kid coming home and, if dad got a little too excited every single, after every game, he's like, "Oh man, you should have done this," or "You remember this?" I mean, you're just like, "Oh my Lord," I mean, it's a different level now, because it's like your sport, lacrosse, basketball, these are sports that there's no such thing as seasons anymore. These kids play year round. It's to the detriment, in my opinion, to these kids' bodies and their minds. They're just done. I mean, they get cooked before, when we were growing up, it was like, okay, you had seasons. All right. Well, we got 2 options. Do you want to play football, or do you want to run track, or you want to do this? I mean, you had fall sports, spring sports, summer sports, and our parents were like, "Listen, we don't care what you do, but you're going to be doing something every single season. You pick what you want to do," and you just you start to do it as a kid. And it's like, people, instead of their parents steering them into things. I mean, I talked to my dad about this about 10 years ago. I'm like, "How did you decide what sports you wanted to put us in and whatnot?" He's like, "It's simple." He goes, "I let you guys pick out whatever you wanted to do." He goes, "And I just ask you," he's like, "Hey, you still having fun? You still participating in this?" He goes, "It's real simple, man." I mean, this is verbatim what my dad said, and I quote, he goes, "No one likes to play anything they suck at." It's like, so it's like, you're not any good. Guess what? You're not having fun, you know? And when you're really young, you just want to be with your friends. But then that competitive edge starts to develop. And if you can't compete, then it's not any fun for you, And so my dad was like, "I just let you guys kind of figure it out." It's like, as you started getting better at certain things, guess what? You want to play that a little bit more. Hey, Dad, can I go to football camp? Can I do this? Can I do that? You're asking me. I'm not feeding it to you, but it was a lot different because you couldn't play baseball year round. You didn't get to compete in 7 World Series every single year. It's like, dude, I got parents that they're like, oh, well, we're going to the World Series. I'm like, how many worlds are there, and how many world champions can there possibly be? And it's crazy, man. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's nuts. But these sports just wear these kids out. And the parents are just. As a coach, that's a whole nother aspect we never had to deal with growing up. As a coach, now sometimes you're the one that's got to talk to the parents and start pumping the brakes a little bit. It's like, hey, listen, or how do you get and this is a great question for you, Mike. How do you get a kid's parents to understand that maybe Johnny just isn't going to be the next Mike Adams, regardless of how many pitching, how many private pitching lessons he takes and how many this, it's just like, they're happy to pay for it and happy to drive him in there. But it's like, at what point do you have to have a conversation with the parents to go, hey, you know what? Maybe we can talk a little bit, it's just, from a sense of motivation or just a sense of sometimes that's a very sticky place to kind of go into. It's like, you feel like you got to have enough good relationship with that parent so they know that you're not trying to overstep your boundaries as a coach, but it's like, you got to be an advocate for the kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a couple kids that I've worked with that I've had to tell the parents, but look, he's not into it. I think you want this more than he wants this. And he's, I'm not going to just take your money, just take your money. I've had a few parents where it's, they want it so bad and the kid's like,
yes,
and trying to go through, and a lot of my stuff is drill based. So, they're trying to do drills, and they have no ambition to do it. And I'm like, look, he's not ready right now. He's not ready. Or the other one I get a lot is, how can you make my kid throw harder? I'm like, whoa, let's work on getting his mechanics down, make him throw strikes, and then we'll go from there. Everybody wants to throw harder. How can you make them throw harder? I'm like, well, sometimes you either just throw hard or you don't throw hard, and yes, and my thing is usually I can make a kid throw a little bit harder, but I'm not going to be able to just put 10 miles an hour up there. If we correct some mechanics, we start using your legs correctly, we start doing everything the proper way. Yes, you're gonna increase the speed just because you haven't been doing it correctly in the past. But everybody wants the miracle of, hey, my kid's throwing 60 miles an hour. How can we get him to throw 70, 75? I'm just like, well, it's sometimes that's either in there or it's not in there. It's not something that we can just automatically just kind of make happen.
Yeah,
so, but yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I've learned to not learned to deal with. Well, I have learned to deal with it, but the biggest thing I've got to deal with is the parents being a little bit too overbearing and, I guess trying to live through their child somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's tough because you see the kids really start to struggle with it. It's like, here they are. It's like all the summer league baseball and stuff like that. It's like, do you guys ever take a vacation? It's like, it's like, well, Stevie really wants to get into this. I'm like,
this is our
Stevie
vacation.
Stevie wants to just go lay on a beach somewhere and do nothing for 4 days. I'm like, dude, he's a kid. Don't forget, this is a 14, 15-year-old kid. It's like, he may want to be a kid at some point this summer, Yeah. That's tough, man.
Yeah, and trust me, I'm guilty of it sometimes too. My daughter plays soccer; she's 13. My little boy's 9, and every now and then I forget. I'm like, they're kids. They're kids. Because I see so much, and I can see, what the mistakes they're doing, or how to correct it, or things that they could have done differently. But I have to realize, hey, he's 9 years old, or she's 13 years old. She doesn't see that, and you can't be as tough. Just because you can see it doesn't mean that she can see it, or maybe she doesn't have the ambition, or maybe he doesn't have the ambition.
Sure.
So, I catch myself every now and then too, just being like, oh God, just back off a little bit. Let them be kids, don't forget that they're 9, stuff like that. So, but then you have some parents that they don't even care.
It's so true, man. That's so true.
We've got about maybe 5 minutes left, Jason, before I know you got to run. And there was one question I wanted to ask you, if you're familiar with this. So you were talking about golf earlier, and Bryson DeChambeau, right? They're from the Dallas area, SMU guy. And what is it, the 20 pounds I think he's packed on in the 3 months of kind of the whole COVID thing, and his idea of putting on more weight, generating more force. Have you seen any of that? I'm just curious to see what your thoughts are on that, because as I've looked at pictures of him, he was, I wouldn't say a slender built guy, but just kind of average build. And then it looked like he really bulked up, and it looked like they cut a little bit, but I was watching the tournament over the weekend, and I'm not saying that he's fat, but you can tell he's got a little bit of, like, he keeps it up. Dunlap's going to be one of his sponsors. And maybe they're going through phases, but just, man, what are your thoughts on that? Because it's so wild. I mean, he's added.
Was it only 20, 25? That's it.
Well, in 3 months. Overall, last year, so I think he's put on
45,
like 40 pounds. Yeah, but 20 pounds in roughly 3 months. And so when seeing that, I mean, immediately I thought of you, because I know you've worked with golfers. What do you think about that?
And I think a lot of that is just, I mean, these guys, they have to be, putting on weight doesn't, I mean, the fact that you have a golfer that's talking about, like, I need to put on some weight. I'm like, bro, you're not taking hits. You're not doing, I mean, it's not like you need a little extra insulation to absorb some of the impact of, taking it too large of a divot out of the ground when I'm like, listen, man, I mean, putting on some weight, I mean, weight is a gross term. We look at the net. Okay. What percentage of
really
that
gross
weight?
In my case, really.
You bet. I mean, I see. I mean, it's like, I would look at that and go, you know what? Especially, when you're at that level. I mean, these guys no more of the like skinfold caliper type of stuff, and now there are groups around town where you can go and get a Dexa scan, which tells you, I mean, unequivocally the most accurate way to get your body fat percentage, bone density, all that stuff. And I would love to know, what his body composition is, because I'm like, dude, if all you did was you say you put on 25 pounds and you put on, 6 pounds of muscle and 19 pounds of fat, I'm like, I don't know what good you think you just did for yourself right there. But I mean, it's like, you aren't making your life any easier. It's like, listen, it doesn't make a difference if you're just walking the course or if he's out there swinging. The more mass he adds to, coming down and swinging, coming through those, I mean, and like if it's just distance he's going for, I'm like, buddy, it doesn't, none of that makes a difference. I mean, I'm good buddies with a guy named Hank Keeney, who was on tour for a long time. He actually is the golf coach for one of my kids who, if we're lucky enough, you may see him on tour, in the next year or so. And I mean, Hank used to be a big guy, and he dropped down. If you saw him now, I mean, he's this thin, slender guy, and he can still crush the ball. He still has the record, average drives of like 320, 338, something like that, on PGA Tour. And this guy still got it. And he's probably 60 pounds lighter than he ever was. When he played, just got real thin. And I'm like, and this is the guy who suffered through a lot of injuries as a result of, having a little bit more of that mass on him. It's like that does, unless you have the muscle to control that body while in motion, because it's like we have this saying in physics, it's not the jump out of the airplane when you're skydiving that kills you. Okay. It's not the jump, it's the landing. Okay. So that is to say, it's like in everything that we do, whether you're throwing a baseball, whether you're swinging a club head, it's not your ability to generate the force, it's your ability to decelerate the force. And that's where, when you don't have the amount of muscle it takes to decelerate all that force that you start to generate, even on your downswing or on your follow through when you're throwing a ball, it's like, that's where all the injuries occur, So it's like all that fat that he added and just weight and mass, I mean, that's not going to do any good. I'd rather him have said, what, I added 10 pounds and I put on 7 pounds of lean mass. And I'm like, hey, that's a good equation right there. Okay. That's a nice ratio. Yeah. You got a little bit more mass, but you got the muscle to control it and control all those negative aspects of physics that come along with that extra mass, and it's just, it's real simple. You understand the science behind a lot of this stuff, and it's a lot easier to dispel the myths, and because there's so much of what we do in this realm that's more philosophical than it is scientific. And it's like, it's like philosophy is great. You tell that to somebody who you just, ruptured a disc in their back because philosophically you thought you were doing the right thing, but none of the science supported it. Okay. That's what's called a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So we're going to let you run, but before we do, if people are interested in maybe working with you, whether they live here in the North Texas area like the three of us do, or if they're interested in some of the other services you provide, like helping design and build out home gyms or corporate facilities, that sort of thing, where can people get in touch with you at?
Simple. My email for my website is just jason@harndenfitness.com. Real simple.
Sweet. All right. Well, Jason, man, appreciate you carving out some time for Mike and myself today. This has been a fun conversation. You're a super deep dude when it comes to this stuff, so it's always enlightening. So appreciate that, man.
Great. I appreciate it. Thanks, Russell. And it was a pleasure to meet you, Mike. I appreciate it, my man.
Yes, sir. Man, I appreciate you. Thank you.